Welcome. My name is Kendra Morgan, and I'm the host of the Rise and Build podcast, where we hope to empower you to rise up and build a strong family, knowing you have to strengthen your hands to do the good work. Come with us as we rise and build. Hi, you guys. Welcome to the roundtable. Today is an exciting day. We are going to sum up our last 4 episodes on building family rhythm. I am honored to sit across from Ande Arbuckle. We are both child development specialists here at Building All Children, and we can't wait to dive into each one of these episodes. But first, Ande, tell us about you. Tell us all about you.
Hello. I am so excited to be here today. So I'm Ande. I'm one of the child development specialists here on staff. I've been in the early childhood field for a number of years, a long time. I've got 3 kiddos at home. They are 12, 9, and 7. And a wonderful husband as well. We live a very busy life, but I'm thrilled to be here and honored to be part of the work that we do here at Building All Children.
Awesome. We love Ande, love what she's about, adore her family. So today we are going to kind of sum up the last 4 episodes on building a family rhythm. First episode was my story. No need to talk about that. Second one was about executing expectations by Melissa Morrow. We also learned from Sean and Courtney on how to build a healthy family, which I cannot wait to dive into that one with you, Ande. And then Sally Mulready talked to us about how to build a family mission statement, family values, which she also had some wise advice. So let's talk about executing expectations from Melissa Morrow. She's also one of our CDs, so I feel like we know her well.
She's on our team. We love her creativity.
She is the one that we're always asking for advice with resources because she thinks out of the box for sure. So what little nuggets did you get from that?
So I love that she talked about the visual schedule.
Yes.
I think this is a huge one. We recommend it to families all the time. And the feedback that we get from it is incredible. I mean, I can't tell you how many times parents have been like, okay, we did this visual schedule, like you said, and oh my goodness, it's working. Their anxiety's lower. We're not fighting transitions like we were before. So we can't recommend that one enough. And it really doesn't have to be fancy.
Well, and I love that about her too, because she talked about her calendar and how she just literally will draw a soccer ball. Like it's nothing fancy, but the kids know the next day what's going to happen or that day. So
we have a similar concept at home with like our morning routine and our evening routine. So it's right there by the kids' bedrooms, hanging up on the wall. It's kind of got their 6 steps they need to do before bedtime. And I drew some rough pictures, but they get the idea. I sent it to a family and was like, this is what it needs to look like. It does not have to be fancy.
Yeah. I also liked her part about, and it's funny because the next night we were going to bed and the kitchen wasn't cleaned. And I was like, no, Melissa Morrow said to have a clean kitchen. And so we cleaned the kitchen.
Yeah.
And there is something about waking up to a clean house.
There really is. And it just allows you to start your day on offense instead of defense, which is going to be something we talk about a little bit. Yeah. But it just keeps you from being behind the 8 ball all day.
Yeah. She mentioned risky play. We talked a little bit about that, and I know you and I have talked about that a lot.
We're big fans of risky play.
We like risky play. Share a little bit more with your knowledge on that.
I think risky play is so important. I think that we've gotten away from it in a lot of ways. We've kind of wanted to protect kids, especially out in the real world. And so kids aren't used to taking those risks. Yeah. Kids aren't used to climbing trees and playing rough. And there really is research behind what that does for your brain. And what that does for your brain is it tells you, I can push through, I can do hard things, I can conquer things, I can be confident.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think we're living in a different world where we want to protect our kids, and we always are about safety. We want children to be safe. But I've also heard lately from just pediatricians that they aren't seeing as many kids getting injured.
I know.
Because we're keeping them so healthy and so safe. Not that we want kids safe. We don't want them injured. But they are going to break some arms and they are going to bunk their head, and that's okay for them to explore and learn what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
What else did you get from Melissa's?
I also liked her jobs that she has for them.
Yes.
I think that's so important. She talked about they do jam, which is jobs after meals.
Loved
so
it.
good. You
Super
talked
cute.
about the 15-minute rock
Yes.
to get the house cleaned up. At our house, we occasionally do what we call blessing hour.
Okay.
So it's usually when I'm cooking dinner, and honestly, they're kind of driving me a little crazy.
Yeah,
So
well, I think dinner is the hardest time.
It is the hardest time of the day. So I'll
Yep.
say it's blessing hour, and they know that that is their chance to run around and do some things to surprise each other.
Oh, I love it.
So somebody will go back and make my bed, or a lot of times they end up cleaning each other's rooms or writing sweet notes for each
that.
other. So just a way to think outside themselves, but usually the house gets tidied up just a little bit too.
Nice. While you're cooking, they're cleaning,
Yeah.
and then it's a beautiful thing after dinner.
Yeah.
I also really thought what she talked a lot about those expectations and setting those expectations high, and letting them know the expectations was really, really good. I feel like we get in the busyness of life and forget to list out those
Totally.
specifics of what to do. And
Yeah.
she gives them reminders all the time. Like when
Yeah.
she talked about pulling up in her car and she told them, okay, it's time to get your backpacks, put them up. She kind of told them
Yeah.
what to do, which was laying those expectations out.
And then she also said there's consequences when you don't meet those expectations, which
Yes.
is sometimes we forget that has to happen.
Yes.
But that's where a lot of the learning happens.
Well, and it's teaching them to be obedient and to
Correct.
follow order and
Yes.
follow rules.
Yeah.
And I feel like we let that slide probably too much.
Yeah.
Me as a parent too, but just a lot of our families seem
Yeah.
to kind of struggle with that.
Yeah, and she seemed like she talked a lot about the redos. They do the redos at home, which I think is great. But then having those consequences when it's actually needed.
So what is a redo?
So a redo in my mind is just where you almost back up.
Yep.
So we have a pause. Ooh, I don't like the way you responded to that. We pause. We talk about how they should have responded. And then we actually reenact what happened.
Yeah.
And let them make a different choice. But what that does is it reroutes the pathways in their brain. So the next time that happens, they know what action needs to be taken.
Okay, so anything else with executing expectations?
I think the main thing I took away is just the consistency and how
Yes.
important that is. But there's so many good nuggets in there. So if you have not listened to that episode, for sure go listen.
Okay, awesome. So the next one was how to build a healthy family with Sean and Courtney. And it was so fun to sit across from them and hear them both talk. They were patient with each other and they listened and fed off each other so well. But man, they said some really good things.
They did. And so much goodness about just choosing healthy foods for our family. And I love all of that because there really is power behind what we put in our body affects the output. So
Yeah.
that affects behavior in so many ways. We see that all the time.
Yeah. And I remember asking him, it's wonderful stuff, but it's also not easy to do.
It is not easy.
So I was like, give us just one thing. If I'm sitting here listening to this overwhelmed, give me one thing that I can do. And I love what Sean said. He said, don't eat out of a box.
Yeah.
And just myself, since then, it has helped me. Like, I'm like,
does
we're not
help.
eating that. We
Yeah.
are going to eat healthier and eat the veggies and the fruits. And so anyway, I thought it was good stuff.
Yeah, and I've heard people say shop the outside of the supermarket. So all the produce aisle, the things that are generally on the outside, not the inside aisles with all of the boxed stuff. So I think all of that is great.
Yeah, good stuff. And Courtney, obviously it's her area, it's her field. She's in it daily. She gives wise advice. I asked them about sitting around the table. I know here at BAC, that's a big deal to us. We ask every single family that comes in if they do that and how often they do that, because we see the power in that. I think they eat at different times, and I think they are making the very best of their busy schedule, doing that around their kitchen island, because I do think their schedule is different. What do you think about all that?
I love that they're working them with their schedule
Yeah.
and they're still coming together, which I think is a huge part of what we're after. I would encourage our families usually, like, if you can get together at the table and it's all about just pausing and being together and having conversation. That's really where the power is, and the research supports that. So we usually tell our families, if you can get together at the table, even a couple times a week, 2 or 3 times a week, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
We teach families a lot to do highs and lows around the table. So I think that's really powerful, talking about the best part of your day and the worst part of your day. I even have a friend recently that said they've started adding in their God shot of the day. So where they saw God. So she was like, my little girls say she saw a beautiful flower and she thought God made that flower. And that was her God shot. So just getting them in the habit of looking for the Lord's hand at work.
Yeah, I think sitting around the table teaches so many skills. One, it's teaching them to sit still.
Yes.
And so I always say, we have parents say they won't sit at a restaurant or I can't go to church. They won't sit. But if you're not ever teaching them to sit still, they're not going to learn that. So when we talk about sitting around the table, I've heard you say it several times, no TV, turn off the TV. And then I think it also teaches them the power of conversation back and forth because most of the time you're talking around the table.
Exactly.
Even if you have those picky eaters that don't want to eat, they don't have to eat, but they have to sit at the table.
Yeah. And it is crazy when you do that. A lot of times those picky eaters, once they sit there long enough, they might eat it. Sometimes they just got to warm up to the food a little bit. And he talked a little bit about the picky eaters and how to work within that. That's something we see a lot too. There definitely are kids that textures really bother them. And so I know it's not always as simple as just you get what you get. Sometimes you do have to work with your kids just a little bit. So figuring out if they like one fruit, that's great. Let's see if we can find one more fruit to add in. Or
I also thought it was great when Sean said your 10-year-old can't drive to the store and get the groceries.
Yes.
Oh,
I know.
I was like, I have to buy the groceries. So they're eating what I buy. And it made me to kind of take a deep breath going, okay, I can do better at this.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and then food. I feel like you have taught a lot of our families about certain foods to eat, what to eat, what not to eat.
So they touched a little bit about all of the chemicals in our food. It was, I want to say 5 years ago that we were seeing some pretty major behavior problems in my son. And we just kept going back to what is causing this? And it felt very episodic where it was like he was great and then another day he was not great. And I was finally able to isolate it to the red dye that he was eating in his diet here and there. And even to this day, if he has even a peppermint, I can usually tell in his behavior for a couple of days. So I think there's power there. I think there are chemicals out there that really do affect kids' behavior. I know it feels like a big thing to say, I'm going to eliminate all dyes and all sugars and all this and that. That's overwhelming. But sometimes just the little things do add up.
I'm just thinking of the people listening to this. Explain red dye and what is it? What do I look for? What is it in?
Generally, it's called red dye 40. And I just look at the ingredients on the package, on the boxed package, and it usually will say red dye number 40.
Okay.
And so red dye number 40 generally, it causes all kinds of things. In most countries, it's not allowed, but in the U.S., it still is. But it, in him, causes lots of hyperactivity and lots of anger and things like that. So I generally tell parents, if you're trying to cut dye out of your diet, you can shop at Trader Joe's. There's generally no dye at Trader Joe's. Aldi often has no dye as well. But outside of that, fruits and vegetables and the produce and the meat generally doesn't have dye. It's just those packaged things you have to watch out for.
Okay, that's good to know. I love it. What else? Thoughts did you have with Courtney and Sean?
I really loved how you talked about just having the fruit bowl out on the table and that being a quick and easy thing to grab. We often do a veggie tray that we keep in the fridge, in that hour before dinner when everyone's starving. I pull out that veggie tray.
Oh, that's smart.
And let them munch on that stuff. So they're not getting the crackers out. They can at least get some veggies in. So just having things easy to go, ready to go.
Yeah, we used to do that veggie tray, and when Jace was little, literally the kid would grab a bell pepper and just eat it like an apple, and I was like, oh, let me cut that up. But just because it was out, that's what he was eating. And he's always been my healthier one as far as the fruits and veggies, but I think it's because I exposed it to him earlier than I probably did the girls.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
There's power behind that.
And you can get some yummy dip to add to it, some hummus or some yogurt dip, so they think it's a little bit of a treat and a little more yummy.
Awesome. And then at the end, I challenged Sean a bit on just leading leading the household, and what does he do with that? And I thought he gave some wise advice with that as well.
Yeah. I loved how he talked about getting up before your family and just setting the tone of your day and getting in the Word. I think that we all benefit from that. I thought that was powerful.
It is. It kind of even goes back to with what Melissa said about setting those expectations. Like he gets up and gets the day going before his family is going. I thought that was kind of cool.
So good.
So building the healthy family, I think when we think of it, we were talking about family as far as the exercising and the eating healthy, but it's also, you've got to dive into that Bible and bring in scripture into the house for sure.
Yeah.
So
it's that time of year again. It's time to turn Tulsa gold. Our annual benefit dinner is in November. Building All Children is 100% funded off of corporate donors and private donations. Our families receive our services with no financial burden because of you. So, how do you get your ticket and table? Visit buildingallchildren.org.
Okay, and the awesome next podcast that we got to listen to was Sally Mulready, and her whole thing was on how to build a family mission statement, which she really dived into family values. I have been in Sally's home. I've seen the family values on the wall. She is big on teaching her boys on what that means and how you stand up for those values and that you don't waver from those values. What did you think of Sally's podcast?
I thought it was great. I love the intentionality behind everything she said. It was clear that there was a lot of thought that went into those values and how important they are, and that she kind of ingrained those into their family culture.
Yeah, and the boys, I love how that she was talking about at the end, like the boys still live by them and they're like not in the home. They have their own, some are in college and some are out of college, and they still live by those family values, and they're probably going to grow up and get married and develop their own family values, which I think she did have one son that just got married. What did you think about the specific values that she talked about?
I thought they were great. I loved how she broke them down into sections. Makes it really easy to think about. I also love that she talked about specific words.
Yes.
So she was able to kind of isolate these specific words, and then it seemed like she kind of built the values around those words, which makes it easy to think about, okay, what could our words be? And then build them out from there.
Yeah. I remember I asked her, like, when do you start this? And she was like, early. They got to know this stuff early, you know? And so I do think you start it early. And it doesn't mean that your values will change, but maybe as they get older, it gets a little bit more deeper or a little bit bigger.
Or it shifts just a little bit as things come into more focus.
Yeah, but I do think finding those core words will help. I think it's overwhelming. Like, how do you start? How do you develop? I'm not a writer. I don't know how to do all that.
Right.
So I think it can be overwhelming, but I think just make it simple.
The words, I think, make it simple, and then you can build them out from there.
When I asked her to define the values, she kind of made it the simple words and kind of went through that. And then she also, Sally was raised in a biblical home, and her parents, owned Shepherd Fold, a camp. So she kind of tied some of that into it also. But what else did you get from it?
I loved how she talked about what you focus on expands. That was one of the big ones that got me. And she just talked about finding the good in everything around us, because what we focus on grows. Yeah. And so when we focus on these values or your mission statement, more comes of it. And that's kind of the way that your family goes, often in line with those, the intentionality of the way.
Yeah, it's good because I think when she said that, it made me think of, if I focus on the negative, that's going to expand. But if I focus on the good, that's going to expand. And which do I want? Of course, the good. That was good. It kind of changed my thinking also. And then I loved when she talked about offensive parenting. And how it's just a positive way of thinking, right? So many times I think we look at the behavior issues and want to play defense with it. But offense, you pass it and you go and you're moving forward with it. So that was another really cool thing she said.
Yeah, and we do that even in the office, telling parents to praise the positive behavior that they see. What we focus on grows. So I love that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. She had a lot of good things to share. Yeah, I loved when Sally was going over all the family values, and I think she covered on 5 or 6 of them. But for families that have little children, I just want to be in reality of that. I mean, we see it all day long, and they're coming in this door and they're overwhelmed. And so I don't want them to be like, well, I don't know how to do that. But I don't think it has to be complicated.
It doesn't. I think you can just pick a couple things to start with. So think of maybe a couple little phrases that you want to center your life around, like something simple like honor God, be kind.
Love that.
Keep it really easy.
Yeah, and I just met with a family really at the beginning of this week, and their son is in 1st grade, and he is not finishing his work. And I just told him, I was like, that's an expectation. Like, your family value needs to be to work hard. And it's like they hadn't thought of that. And I was like, have you ever told them, like, this is unacceptable. Like, you have to finish your work. We expect you to work hard. And they were like, no. And I said, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to work hard. So I think it's just kind of knowing what your family goal is, what you desire. You're raising them to be a mom or a dad someday, husband or wife. And so we've got to set some of those goals so that they know that. So
and you can start small and add to it.
Yes.
It's going to evolve and change over time as different situations arise, and that's beautiful. But starting with just something is really powerful. I think you could even start with a verse that you kind of want to center your life around, and you want to refer to it all the time. This is our family verse. So there's lots of ways this can look. It doesn't have to look just like Sally's.
Right.
It can look like lots of different things, whatever makes sense to your family.
Yeah, one thing the Morgans did is we had the expectation of everybody was going to be involved, and we were a family of 5 and we were going to do life together. And so I did. I mean, if one kid played a softball game, we all went to the softball game.
Yeah.
Jace can tell you like horror stories with volleyball because he went to all of the games. But to this day, my girls will come home from college to see him at homecoming. And so that was important to Ryan and I. And so we set that early on. They kind of knew that was part of our family as we were going to do life together. We were going to be at all the events. I'm so thankful that we did that. What about you guys?
So we don't have a family mission statement. I'd love to start working on one after listening to Sally's episode. But we kind of have a yearly review where we kind of look at the year that passed, what went really well, what areas do we want to focus on doing a little bit better next year, and then we kind of set our intentions for the year. So we really feel like the Lord's calling us to X, Y, or Z, then we kind of know that's where we're headed for the year. And I think after listening to Sally's episode, it's all just about starting every day with intentionality. That's really what it boils down to, is just being intentional with our time, being intentional with our lives, and every day that God gives us, making it count.
Building a family rhythm takes time and takes effort. And I loved how each speaker talked about just the power behind doing that, and how Sally gave out a few important pieces of creating the family value and creating a family that knows exactly what they stand for and what balances them. And I also loved how Sean and Courtney brought in some health of just exercising and eating healthy. And then Melissa brought in great ways of just setting expectations all day long and throughout the day.
So I think it's all so good, but it can feel overwhelming, right?
Yes, totally
when
agree.
you listen to all 3 of those episodes and say, man, I'd love to do all of that, but where do I even start?
Right.
So I think it'd be helpful if we just kind of brainstorm, like, what are some quick wins, like Melissa talked about, that we could do just as a starting point. So I think for me, one of the quick wins could be just having dinner a couple times a week and sharing your highs and lows of the day. It's easy, get you sitting down at the table, having some conversation, connecting.
Love it. I also think just to focus on what you get at the grocery store is what's going in their body.
Yeah.
It made me think differently. And that's just an easy thing that we can do, whether we're at the store or shopping online. We can decide what goes into that cart.
Yeah. And I think from Sally's, a quick win could just be praising good behavior and focusing on what you focus on expands. So just looking for the good, and then just thinking about those key words that potentially you want to focus your family on.
Awesome. Andy, I could sit across from you all day long and visit about children and families. I know your heart, and I know that you have such a passion to see the skills be built and that families rise up and build a strong family. So thank you. Thank you for
Thanks
sharing
for
your
having
wisdom.
me.
Let us close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for these children in our lives. Thank you for all the resources you have placed in our life to help us rise up and build. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for listening to the Rise and Build podcast, brought to you by Building All Children, a child development program in Tulsa, Oklahoma. To learn more about Building All Children or the Rise and Build podcast, please visit buildingallchildren.org. This podcast is crowdfunded. We appreciate our sponsors and the donations given by our listeners. Come with us as we rise and build.